right, listeners. Well, I got a buddy of mine here. A special treat for you guys. I can't say that I've known Ian a long time, but I have been on a lot of different calls where Ian was on it, and every time I'm like, I like that guy, and I want to interview him. I like what he has to say. I love his story, and I think you guys will like it too. Mr. Ian Meyer, how are you doing today?
Hey, great, Preston.
Awesome.
I'm
tell us
here.
Tell us a little bit about you. I know you serve. We had a pre-talk about this Los Angeles area to us people from out of the area, but Los Angeles is a very big place. So tell us a little bit about you, your background, and how you got into home inspection in the area you serve.
Oh, well, that's like a couple hours conversation. Well, first I have to say I'm very honored to be here because you started your podcast in 2014.
Yeah, I did.
And I started in home inspections in 2014. So when I started home inspecting, I used to listen to your podcast constantly.
Oh,
I didn't have a lot of work at the time. And I used to fantasize that one day I will be important enough to be on this podcast.
Oh, man.
So to me, today is like a dream come true.
Oh,
fantasizing about this for 7 years.
Well, I hope I didn't let you down. It's like,
now it's better. Now it's video too.
I hope it wasn't a letdown or anything.
Back then, you just called people on the phone. Now we're on video Zoom, so this is actually, better.
Yeah. When I first started, I had this app, and it was terrible. The audio, but it's gotten so much better. But go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Hey, where were my story? Oh, I was born in San Francisco. Was only child of a single mom. I was literally born around the corner from Haight-Ashbury.
Oh, wow.
So I'm a product of free love and
the hippie generation.
Yeah. My mom was a hippie. She denied it, of course, as she got older, but their pictures prove it. So grew up in San Francisco. Originally, wanted to be a musician, wanted to be a drummer. So the music scene in San Francisco was okay, but it was much better in Los Angeles. So I moved to Los Angeles, was in bands, played in front of every record company in existence, recorded a single, got on a little bit of radio play, got some recognition around town, but never really signed that big record deal like, I thought we were going to. And I used to say, I'm going to make it in the music business or die trying. And one day I woke up and I'm like, I don't really want to die that badly.
Good stuff.
So then I was kind of like, well, now what? And plus I'd met my future wife at the time. And, that was one of my other big goals, get married and have a house and kids and all that. When it became pretty apparent I wasn't going to do that being a starving musician making no money. So I was kind of like, what next? And I always had this sort of natural ability to point out problems and things.
Right.
And I used to think of it as a curse because it constantly get me in trouble at any day job I had. Man,
me too.
And I know you're big on books, so I read this book very randomly one day. It's called Now Discover Your Strengths.
Oh, okay. Write that down. Who's Marcus Buckingham?
Yeah, it's actually a series of books. The first one is called First Break All the Rules. The second one's called Now Discover Your Strengths.
Okay.
So I read First Break All the Rules because it was a management book. Okay. And then this is part 2. And at the end of this book, if you buy it, it doesn't count if you get it from the library. There's a code. You can go online and take this assessment. And it tells you what you're good at. And it says you're really good at finding problems and pointing out things that are wrong. And I'm like, know that. And it just, you can make a career.
Does your wife say the same thing? No, I'm just kidding.
And it was like, there are actually careers in that. I'm like, the first time in my life that my wheels started spinning, like,
somebody can pay me for that?
So how does that work? So I still didn't know, but I was at a party and someone I knew started asking me what I do. And in the middle of playing on all these bands, I was going to college because, basically my mom bribed me. She'd pay for room and board if I went to college. So I figured that was much better than working a day job while I was trying to play in bands.
Right.
So I ended up with a degree in business administration and finance, which really had nothing to do with music. But this lady was like, "Hey, what do you have?" And I'm like, "Oh, I got a degree in business and finance." She's like, "Oh, well, my company's looking for people like that." It was a wholesale mortgage company. I was like, "Okay, I don't know anything about that, but sure." And so I went and interviewed there, and I just fell in love with everything real estate related. And after a couple of positions there, they put me in the back where I inspected um, loans that we had funded that we probably shouldn't have.
Okay.
So, and my favorite thing to do was read the appraisal reports and go through, and I'd actually write reports about the appraisal reports, whether they were good or bad or whatever, or someone screwed up or someone didn't screw up, and trying to, convince these uh, investors in New York and like why they should be buying loans that, based on these properties in LA or San Francisco or whatever.
Right.
And I really like that. And the first time in my life, I started making a little bit of real money. So my wife and I bought a fixer-upper house, and it was 4 walls and a foundation. I mean, the roof was shot, the plumbing was shot, there's holes in the floor. I mean, you could see the crawl space from the bathroom. It was bad. But we didn't have kids yet. So we bought it, and we would camp in one room and fix another room and then move our campsite. So we would do that. We would do that at night and weekends while I worked in an office,
Right.
looking at pictures of houses and writing reports about houses. And I was like, man, this working on houses is a lot cooler than sitting in an office working on houses. So that's kind of how home inspections entered my mind.
Right.
But then 2008 came along, and my mom passed away.
Oh, sorry.
My wife got pregnant, and the economy crashed all within 6 months of each other.
Wow.
And
I remember not as bad for me as you, but it was bad. I remember that time.
So I'm like, well, I can't start my own business now. I mean, in retrospect, I wish I'd just gone for it.
Yeah.
But I talked myself out of it, did some other things, and worked at another job that had nothing to do with anything. And then they laid me off, and I was just like, oh man, now what do I do?
You got a baby on the way too.
Well, at this point, I had 2 kids, a wife, a mortgage, and I just got laid off from a job I didn't even like.
No.
And I was just like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but no one's ever going to lay me off again. That was my big thing, is I don't ever want to laid off again, because I'm like, I can go get the dream job right now, but who knows in 10 years. I mean, I've seen I looked at my resume, and like half these companies don't exist anymore because they've been bought out or sold or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So I was like, I had that home inspection idea. Why don't I pursue it? Because, right before the crash, I mean, they were starting to run the late night ads about, you too can be a home inspector. And I was like, oh man, that was kind of my sign. The real estate market was about to crash. So now, been years later, it's 2014 at this point. So I was like, let's probably try that again. And my main thing is I just wanted a job where I didn't get laid off.
Right.
So I, signed up for some classes, signed up at the ASHI school, signed up at the International Board, signed up for some infrared classes, and just started taking classes, and voila, home inspector.
Is California licensed? I'm not sure. I can't remember. No.
Oddly, no, California is not licensed. We do have laws on the books. There are laws that we have to follow, but there's no specific license. And so that's how I got into home inspecting. And for me, it was just like, wow, dream come true. Like, you're going to pay me to be a negative person and go into a house
and point out problems.
And that was one thing. I was just naturally good at it. Like, I don't necessarily know every little construction term. But I know when I look at something if it's wrong.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny you say that, because like you were into drums. I was always into art. Like, I was art in high school. My mom was an artist. I always wanted to be an artist. In fact, I came really close to getting an art scholarship at Pratt Institute. Like, I was like on the short. I got down to 34, and there were only 10 scholarships, but neither here nor there. I wound up being a home inspector, and and I still paint and stuff like that. I still love it. You probably play drums still. But people ask me all the time. Well, and I'm pretty good at being a home inspector, not trying to toot my own horn. People ask me, "Well, are you real mechanically?" And I was like, "No," but my mom and dad were divorced, but my dad always had pieces of shit cars and pieces of shit houses that we always had to repair. Sorry, I hope that didn't mess up my iTunes thing. But like, you learn to fix things because they were always broken. That sort of thing.
Yeah, my grandfather always well, he had always been self-employed.
Mm-hmm.
And he ran companies that literally made widgets.
Right.
Like he had one company that made pieces for car jacks, another company made pieces for airplane parts, and another one made non-standard screws. So he was very mechanically inclined, and he barely graduated high school. So he was always kind of my hero as a little kid.
Oh, that's cool.
I want to grow up and be self-employed, but then I got very depressed, and I never got that gene of any great ideas because he always had ideas.
Right.
Oh, this widget doesn't exist. I'm going to build a factory that's going to make this widget. And, I never had that. It took me a long time to realize, well, maybe instead of making a thing, I just need to make a service.
I hear you, brother. All right. So it's 2014. You've taken some classes, and got a lot of certifications. So how did you start? Did you work a kind of a part-time job while you were trying to build it up, or did you just dive in? And how'd you come up with the name too? I sort of combine questions.
Well, back when I was laid off, so I had no choice. Dive in full time.
Okay.
There was no part time in it, which was tough because really wasn't bringing in any money. I really got started as I just put it on my Facebook, like any friends who are not in escrow want a free home inspection. So I wasn't, doing home inspections for people who were, in a transaction, but just people who happen to own a house or live in a house. So I did like 30 of those.
Wow.
And I had a really nice range of friends, from people who lived in very nice houses to people who lived in little shacks. So, I did those 30 houses and did 30 reports. And by that time I started feeling really confident, way too confident. So by the time I got the first pay, by the time that first deal finally rolled in, I was like, yeah, I know exactly what I'm doing. By the third inspection, I was like, crap, I still have a lot to learn. But no, I had no choice but to just dive straight in. Luckily, my wife, she had started her own business too, knowing that I was getting laid off. And it was doing fairly well at the time. But it was a struggle to, I'm still not even sure how we covered bills at the time. And there were definitely knocks at the door from bill collectors in the bank and going, hey, you can pay this mortgage or what? So it was a real struggle at the beginning to get it going, but I had no choice. I was not going to be laid off again, and I had 2 kids to feed. So yeah, I still remember the first time I paid the mortgage completely out of just home inspection money.
Oh, that's awesome. Well,
that was a big deal.
I remember doing those first inspections too, even though it was very early on. It was proof of concept, and especially like if they, gave you a good review or they told their friends about you, you're like, even though it was like, just a handful of inspections, it was proof of concept that, all right, I can make a living doing this. So how did you market in the beginning? How did you, like you said, you put it out on Facebook and do some free inspections. So then how did you branch out from that to start getting more paying gigs?
Well, because I had a lot of experience marketing bands, I thought I understood marketing. I think in retrospect, that was kind of that was not so great, but I understood, you make a website. I've been building websites on and off for different bands for years. I knew about making, brochures and get business cards. And then I just started networking, joined the Chamber of Commerce. And then I remember I was at a Chamber of Commerce meeting and this guy goes, oh, there's this real estate meeting you probably want to know about. And he says, it's Friday at this restaurant. And I'm like, okay. So I got up early Friday morning, drove to this restaurant, and I'm driving like, I don't even know this guy who told me about this. Like, he could just been setting me up on a wild goose chase. and what if I show up and they're like, who are you? Or what if they're not even there? And he just, And I got up early for nothing. No, got up there and they're like, hey, sit down. And so next thing I know, I started going to this breakfast every Friday and meeting different agents. And it was a slow process. But it was just a lot of online, not paid ads, but just working Facebook and the website and going to networking events and just trying to meet people and get to know people.
Sure. Now, were a lot of these networking events, were they realtors, like realtor type networking events? Is that
I tried everything at the beginning. Obviously, realtor events are where it's at,
right?
but I just any networking event I could somehow get myself into, and then you start figuring out which ones are worth your time and which ones aren't.
Right, right. Did you ever do any presentations in offices or lunches or breakfasts or anything like that, or take anything to the offices?
Uh, some a little bit, not a lot. But there was kind of funny story. One time, a manager of a local brokerage called, and he wanted like all this money for me to be a sponsor. I'm like, I don't have that kind of money.
Right, right, right.
But he kept running into me every time there was any kind of network event. I'd be there, and then he'd walk in. And so finally, he sent me a friends request on Facebook. I'm like, wow, okay. And then he said, "Whoa, we're gonna go hiking." So I just went hiking with him, and then he was like, "Let's go to breakfast." And so we're sitting there at breakfast, this breakfast table with me and a bunch of agents. And he's like, "Oh, hey, everybody, this is Ian. He's a home inspector. Oh, he's teaching a class next week at the office." I'm like, "I am? Oh, okay." So it was, like I said, it was just a lot of networking and getting to know people and getting in front of people and not being ignored.
Yeah. Now you've grown it. I mean, you have multiple inspectors today, correct? There are several
Yes.
people on your website.
There's this 6 inspectors altogether. Yes.
Awesome, awesome. How so you've grew it and you're able to hire, which is awesome. That is a fantastic. How when COVID hit, now how did that change like the way you guys did your inspections or how you did marketing, or did it? What effects did COVID have?
Well, at first it shut us down completely. Um, at that point, it was just me and 2 other guys. Well, I'd hired one guy. He worked for me for 2 days, and I said, "You need to go home now. Uh, I don't know what's going on." And then I had to lay my other guy off because we just had no business for weeks. We went
Right.
about 8 weeks. But I was like, well, I don't know what's going to happen as far as expanding the business, but I'm not going to lose my home inspection business because I don't want to do anything else. So I just sat home and blogged and wrote manuals and figured out what's going to happen. And then the funniest thing happened is a lot of my competitors retired
Yeah.
because, there were a lot of guys who probably wanted to retire, but because they lost all their money in 08, they couldn't.
Right, 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 right.
So, you had tons of home inspectors running around who were, in their late 50s, 60s, 70s. And a lot of them just got out of the business. And all of a sudden, the phone just started ringing like crazy, going, "Hey, my home inspector retired. Or my home inspector doesn't answer his phone anymore. My home inspector left the state."
Right, right, right.
And we're just like, okay. So, I had to call the guy who worked for me for 2 days. I'm like, "Come back," and call the other guy I laid off. So you come back. And next thing you know, I'm hiring another guy and another guy, and things just exploded, and just really just existing and being determined to get through it. And obviously we had protocols, masks and gloves and wipes and this and that we had to deal with. But a lot of it just being willing to survive and just
Yeah.
saying, I'm not going to let this defeat me.
Do you think like all those people, after those people retired and they were calling you, do you think a lot of your like blogging or online or digital efforts were starting to pay? How were these people who were calling you finding you? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've always been big, back when I was 20s and, partying and not really being responsible. I had a lot of friends who were very techies,
Right, right, right.
and they all went on to great careers in IT and web design and video game design. So I was always around a lot of tech friends. So I was always kind of like the Luddite of the group.
Right, right.
So I just picked up on, oh, there's this thing called Facebook. All right, well, I guess I should have one. And here's how you post. And oh, I guess hashtags are a thing.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm supposed to should have linked it. And then when I got out of that world and into the real estate world, people started looking at me like, oh, you know all about social media and websites? And people started looking at me like I'm some sort of guru. So I started teaching classes.
Because you did it just like a little bit longer than they did. You're the guru. It doesn't take.
I just thought everyone my age knew what I knew because
Yeah.
I was just scraping the bottom of what my tech friends knew. But then when I started getting around real estate agents who are my age, a lot of them didn't know. And that was, so you talked about classes. I didn't get talked into classes at brokerages, but the real estate board, I got in with a local real estate board and I convinced them to let me teach a class on how to use Facebook for real estate agents.
Oh, wow.
That class was so popular that they invited me back 5 times in a row. 5 years in a row to teach a class. And then I got the Chamber of Commerce to let me teach a class on it too at one point. So I kind of became known as this social media guy. So I always had a big social media presence, and I'm on, when I rebuilt the website a couple different times. I think we're in the 3rd or 4th generation now. And I finally subbed that out to someone else. But so yeah, no, we've always been just big on posting a lot online, and Instagram for us has been huge because that's where all the millennial agents are.
Absolutely. Well, I got to press you on that for a few minutes. All right. So you taught a class on how to use Facebook for real estate agents. I'm gonna press you on that for a little bit. For all of our home inspector listeners, what tips, give us, if you could, 4 or 5 tips for Facebook and Instagram if they want to start using it. What tips or do's and don'ts would you tell home inspectors for Facebook and for Instagram?
Well, the biggest thing is you got to understand the difference between your business and your personal.
Right.
I see way too many people posting stuff that is not going to drive business. Like if you're posting about politics and religion and what president you like or don't like, you're essentially telling half your clientele that you don't want to do business with them.
Yeah.
Because,
controversial.
Sorry, look at any election. Every election comes down to almost a 50-50 split.
Yeah.
So if you're posting a lot on one side, you're essentially telling the other side not to do business with you. And I've seen people almost go out of business over that. But the biggest thing is post often. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people like, well, I posted a couple times and nothing happened. Well, posting is a lot like a snowflake. One snowflake is just going to melt in the sun. It's not going to do anything. And you may have a brilliant post and it may get a couple likes, and you may have a post that doesn't get a couple likes. It doesn't really matter though, because those are just little individual snowflakes that melt in the sun. But if you're posting every day, constantly, for weeks and months and years, well, eventually you have a snowstorm, and no one can ignore a snowstorm.
Right.
So you really have to think of it as a long-term game. It's not a short-term. You can't just put up a couple posts and expect people to call. You got to really work it over time because it's a very long game.
I'll take that one step further too. I agree with you on like politics, religion, anything that's controversial, stay away from. I think personal stuff that's like just kind of lighthearted about your family and stuff is okay. In fact, people like, and I can't tell you how many times I go in offices and people say, I know your girls. I watched them grow up, but I'll give a tip on that. Don't always be like I'll give you an example. You ever been on a cruise and they have like a dude's best chess contest or whatever? I know you're like, where are you going with this, Preston?
I have no idea where you're going with this.
I know. Well, no, but here's the thing. You'll have a dude come out there that's like in really good shape or whatever. And I told my girls, like they're teenagers at this point. I'm like, that guy will not win if one of these dudes that's really out of shape will come out there and just be crazy. If one of those dudes will come out there like Chris Farley and just be crazy, the crowd will love them, because it's almost like, it's like that person who's always like, I have the perfect life and the perfect husband and the perfect. You're making us all feel bad because none of us have the perfect thing. I said, I think if you show people that you're a real person and you got flaws and warts like everybody else, but you're real. People like that, as long as it's not too, obviously don't tell us, too much TMI, that sort of thing. That's my theory.
You're right. You don't, no one wants to do business with a robot.
Right.
This is a very people to people business, and people want to do business with people. So yeah, you put some personality out there.
Yeah. And just stay away from controversy. I mean, I know you've got a political opinion. I have one. You know what? I just keep that in my family because just like you said, there's people that have a different political opinion than me that use me for home and have actually spoke up for me, like in a forum and stuff. And I've seen them post political stuff that's different than mine. So I always keep them in mind. Like, I don't want to piss them off because they've stuck up for me. And you know what? At the end of the day, that's something I just keep at home. You know what I mean? It has nothing to do with my ability to do a home inspection or their ability to sell a house, that sort of thing. It looks like you want to say something.
Oh, I was just saying, I remember one time I was at an inspection and, I'm doing my inspection and the agent and the buyer sitting there talking and the agent started bringing up politics.
You never know who you're talking to either, man.
And it became very clear that he was upsetting the buyer's wife.
Yeah, you can almost read the face,
And he didn't pick up on that and kept going.
Oh,
well, guess what? They didn't buy that house.
Really? Wow.
And he didn't work with that agent again. And he bought a different house with a different agent. So,
Yeah, it's gotten crazier too, but yeah, let's get away from that. What advice? Ed, what advice if somebody came up to you and you're pretty successful now? And I mean, like I said, I wasn't kidding about that. I've seen you on a couple of things and I like what you said. And it's like, I like that guy. Very likable. What advice if somebody came up to you who was just thinking about getting into business? You've had success and you struggled early on. And what advice would you have to maybe shorten their learning curve?
Well, you didn't ask me, but I'm going to go back and cover why I went from 1 to 6.
Oh, okay. Well, add that in.
Because that kind of covers this. So yeah, I went 5 years as a one-man shop. And then one day it was coming up the end of the year. And my oldest son's birthday is right after Christmas. And I'm coming out of this crawl space and I'm just feeling defeated. And I don't know why I pulled out my phone in the crawl space and stood just inside the crawl space, looked at my ISN and said, I had the best year ever as a one-man shop, and pulled up my bank account and there's a bunch of zeros there. And I went, this sucks. My kid's birthday's in a week and I've got no money.
And you're working your tail off too.
And I'm working my tail off. And that's really when it realized, like, look, Ashley School, Internachi, A-Hit, all these places, they sell you this dream of you're going to make all this money being a home inspector. The reality is you're not. Yeah, you're going to gross 6 figures, but you're not going to keep it because half of it is going to marketing.
Right.
Website, business cards, tools, clothes, insurance,
wear and tear on your vehicle.
Yeah, my first car died on the side of the road on the way to inspection, so I had to buy another car, not really prepared for it. All that adds up. And it occurred to me, like, who are the guys that are really making it as a one-man shop? Well, it comes down to 2 groups. One, the older guys who, they retired from their first job. This is their second career. Their kids are grown. The house is almost paid off. And this is just their fishing money.
And they're not really spending any money on marketing. It's just, it's like word of mouth or whatever.
Or 2, the guys, gals that don't have kids, so they just don't have expenses.
Right.
Like, those are the only 2 people who really make it as a one-man shop.
And you're not fitting into either one of those categories right now.
But if you've got a mortgage and you've got 2 little kids at home, it's just not enough income to really make it. So that's why I had to expand. And I think the guys who work for me now make more money than I did as when I was one-man shop because they don't have any expenses.
Exactly. I wish I could work for me.
I mean, they're sure, they only get a small, the equivalent of a small percentage of an inspection, but they're getting, 7, 8, 10 inspections a week with no expenses because I'm covering all their expenses.
Right.
They're doing pretty well. So, what advice to give to someone starting out is you really got to you got to figure out what your income needs are and what your costs are, because I made the mistake I think a lot of people make. If I could just do 4 inspections a week, for, say 300, 400 each, like, oh, compared to my paycheck that I'm getting now from this crappy day job, like, oh, that's gonna be awesome. But you don't realize like how much money it takes to get to that point.
Exactly.
Websites, and brochures, and insurance, and gas and tools. I mean, all that. I mean, individually, none of that is very expensive,
But added up.
it adds up.
And the ulcers you get, like when the phone doesn't ring one week, it's like, oh my God,
Oh, I remember a very funny, well, it's not funny at the time, but like, so I started 2014, so it's February 2015. The phone just started ringing like crazy. I did like 10 inspections in a row, like over like, I don't know, 10, 15 days. And I was like, yeah, everything's paying off. I did my first 2 in a day. Everything's great. And then the phone didn't ring again for 2 weeks. And it was just like, whoa.
What did we do something wrong? You're like, what happened? You're having somebody call your number to make sure it's still working. I've done that. Like, is the phone working?
You do that. You start Googling yourself. Like, is there some bad review of me posted somewhere that I don't know about? But that's the nature of getting the business off the ground. Is it's tough. People, constantly call and say, hey, I want to be a home inspector. What does it take? And they start getting in the technical side. I'm like, the technical side you can figure out. I mean, everyone gets really wrapped up in the technical side, but you can take classes and read books and learn all about the technical side. The hard part's getting the phone to ring.
Yeah, it is. It is. And there's not a set formula for that. You know what I mean? It's like, I found that out, like, hiring a marketing person, because I had always done the marketing and I just did it. I didn't have like a set, I did go to offices and I did all this and stuff that kept, but a home inspection to me was like, you teach somebody how to inspect the roof. There was a routine and boom, you do this, you'll have success. But with marketing, it was so much more like, it wasn't as structured as that. And it wasn't, you know what I mean? It was like, and it changes. The reality is a house doesn't change that much. We get smart houses and I might have to learn how to, check a thermostat that can be controlled by a thing. But the reality is in the last 20 years, house hasn't changed that much. But marketing has, you know what I mean?
Hi, Preston Sandlin here. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Hope you got some value out of it. I'm not really selling anything or anything like that, but check out it. It helped me a little bit if you guys follow on some of my other stuff. TikTok, it's Inspector Crazy Pants. I think I'm Inspector Crazy Pants on Instagram. It's kind of my thing. Also, I have some art, PrestonSandlin.com. I know that doesn't relate to home inspection or anything, but check it out. I think if you view it, it kind of helps me out, or thumbs up or whatever. But anyway, thank you for listening. Hope you got something out of it, and I hope to see you guys at a conference sometimes, and maybe we have a beer or 6. Thanks a lot for listening.
And yeah, there's definitely different ways to market, and there's definitely, looking back, there's like, oh, I was a little overconfident in my marketing abilities, and that almost bit me in the butt. But yeah, it's just a lot of hard work and a lot of perseverance, and just.
Do you think you get a fair amount of, a lot of business obviously comes from realtor referrals, but you did a lot of work blogging, and there's a lot of techie people now do their own research. Do you think you get a fair amount of business, or a certain percentage, just people finding you via your blog or the internet work you've done?
25% of all our business has no agent attached to it.
Wow. Do you think that's a trend that's going to get bigger or smaller? I mean, you know what I'm saying?
I don't know, because that was the trend when I was a one-man shop. It was always about 25% just came from people finding me on Yelp, Google, social media, whatever. I was really shocked when I got to 4 inspectors and then ran the numbers and went, wow, we're still at 25%. Because in my head, we were much more agent heavy. But the reality of when I looked in, ISN and looked at how many deals didn't have an agent attached to it, it was still at 25%. And it's anytime I look at it, it's still right around 25%. If it's going to get bigger, smaller, it's hard to say. Everyone keeps talking about they're going to push the agent out and this and that, but the agents still seem busy, at least the ones that are good.
Yeah.
That aren't good. I mean, there's a lot of turnover in agents, but the other thing about the social media is that's how a lot of agents find us.
Yeah.
Because a lot of agents are new and they don't want to admit to their clients that they don't know anybody yet.
Sure.
So they go on Yelp and Google and Facebook and whatever, and who's a good home inspector. So
and that's part of the value they bring. They have knowledge of the vendors.
So a big, so our percentage is 25% of non-agents, but the percentage that comes in through that is probably much higher because it's a lot of agents finding us that way.
Gotcha. All right, I'm gonna change gears here for a second. Then we're gonna get to the lightning round, which I promise to be a little bit of fun. And for all the listeners out there, in the old days, the people I interviewed way before had it made because they got the questions ahead of time. But with my new format, like Ian didn't.
I was wondering that because I know you used to send the questions out.
Yeah. Ian didn't get the questions ahead of time. So I was like, I changed the format up a little bit just to make it a little more spontaneous. But give Ed some credit. He didn't have time. In the old days, people had time to, kind of think about their answer. So what advice would you give? I know there's a lot of listeners out there who get price shoppers. First thing you say, how much you charge for home inspection? How much you charge 1,500 square foot? And I don't know if you're like me. I mean, we're not the cheapest, so we're not going to win, that race to the bottom. How do you handle that call, or what advice would you give other people to handle that call?
My best advice is we're really busy. If you don't want that time slot, someone else will.
Wow. Nice.
I turn it around on them. Like, we're not desperate for their business.
Right.
Those price shoppers, they're gambling on that you're desperate for their business. And I just don't play that game. We're not desperate for your business because our phone's ringing. Now, sometimes it's not, but I don't let that on.
Well, but a lot of times I've heard people that kind of take that strategy, and a lot of people will be like, whoa, wait a minute. You like you said, well, if we're they just blunt, if you're, like you said, if you're looking for the cheapest, we're not it. Let me give you so-and-so's number. And you would think, and we'd probably think, well, that's crazy. But a lot of people will be like, whoa, wait a minute. Tell me more about.
my wife is real good at that. She's on the phones and they'll like, well, blah, 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 it's cheaper. Doesn't even do that. And she'd be like, well, good luck with that. And they're like, wait, what do you mean? You put it in their head, like, there's a reason that other one's cheaper. And I mean, there's always going to be someone cheaper. And I don't even know how some of these companies exist on what they are. But, my tagline is inspections that matter for people who care.
Nice.
And that comes down to, if you don't care, we're not for you.
Gotcha. Well, that goes into my next question, which is good. How do you differentiate yourself in the market? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of home inspectors in the LA market. How do you stand out among that?
It's a good question because I hear you've asked this question to a lot of people over the years, and I've heard a lot of different answers. But it just comes down to we care.
Nice.
And we do a good job. We don't toot our horn with fake warranties or fake guarantees or any of this stuff because nobody really cares about that. People just want a good, solid home inspection.
Gotcha.
And we just pride ourselves on our quality.
Gotcha.
Quality work. And we care. And, the people who answer the phone care, and the people who do the inspections care, and everybody really cares. And people pick up on that. It comes down to a book Seth Godin wrote. Well, he's written a lot of books, but he says that's what really marketing is about, is dealing with people who care about their product. Or Simon Sinek's great book, Start With Why. people buy why what you do, not what you do.
Yeah, your story. People love story.
So to me, that's what I stress. I stress our why.
Yeah.
Because anybody, we're in an unlicensed state. Any bozo can just call himself a home inspector, but do they have a why? I'm very passionate about houses. I'm very passionate about finding problems. I'm very passionate about helping people out in this time of buying a house is kind of like a mini crisis, right? I mean, so much stuff is going on, so we're very passionate about helping people out and doing the right thing.
Yeah. You talk about the why and the story behind it. I don't know if you saw my post about a week or two ago. I was listening to a book. I know you're a big book person too. MJ DeMarco. I love his books. He's a Fast Lane Millionaire. Don't let the title fool you. I mean, it sounds a little, but he had a new one. But what he mentioned, the Dave, I forget the guy's last name, Dave's Bread, Dave's Killer Bread. And in the book, and Dave had, he has this bread. If you've ever been to the bread aisle, it's called Dave's Killer Bread. And he has like all this like whole wheat nutty bread. And I'd never bought it because it's kind of expensive. It's like $5-6 a loaf. And he was in jail off and on for like 15 years of his life. All kinds of stuff, assault, drugs, beating people up, nothing sexual, I don't think, but, just that kind of stuff, and he realized that like when you get out of jail, a lot of people wind up back in jail because they just can't get a good job, really, because nobody will hire, an ex-convict. So that became his mission. He was passionate about bread, and then he hired people that were former inmates to give them a good job, and that was his mission. Now, so I went and bought the bread, and it's great. But then somebody pointed out, Dave doesn't own it anymore. He sold it for like $270 million, and then he went and beat somebody up. but they still, the people who own it have that mission where I think 40% of their workforce is given. It's called Second Chance, and they work with a lot of other companies to try to get people, employment and second chance. So anyway, I bought into the mission. Sorry, I didn't mean to take us down that rabbit hole, but try the bread. It's really good. Dave's Killer Bread, but the story, that made me want to buy it, if that makes sense. Sorry, I didn't mean to take us off on that tangent.
But no, it's true. I mean, Simon Sinek goes into way deeper than I ever could, but people get into what you do, what is your heart in.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned a couple of books, and it's funny. We were on a call together. I mean, it wasn't just us; it was a bunch of people, and somebody had mentioned Tribe of Millionaires, and I remember you said, "Yeah, I didn't like that book because the guy." And I've since listened to it, and I remember what you said, and I agree with you. It did give like a lot of good things, but the whole premise of the book, and I know they're trying to put like a lot of these business books into fables and try to make it more readable, but it's like the dad died and like all these people who were his friends, like show him all these things about business and all, and that's all good and great. But the reality is, if the dad really cared, why was he such a shitty dad during his lifetime? And
that book hit me because growing up without my dad,
exactly,
having a dad and finding out my dad didn't give a rat's behind about me. He knew I existed. He just didn't care. So to read that book and have everyone say, this is a great, inspiring book. And the whole premise of the book is this guy doesn't care about his son.
Until he dies. Until he
dies. And then everyone is like, oh, your dad was this great guy. And I'm like,
no, he wasn't. Why?
Well, the thing is, the book is all about holding people accountable.
All right.
And I'm like, well, if the premise of the book is holding people accountable, why didn't anyone hold his
I'm with you.
Go find his son and reconnect. And so, yeah, no, I thought the book was, I didn't like it at all.
Yeah. Well, the principles after the fact, but the whole, I think a lot of these books, because I listen to books all the time, man. I'm a book junkie. I listen, because I don't have time to read, but I listen. And that's a big thing now, is to put them into like a parable to make them more, readable or whatever. And even that MJ DeMarco, I highly recommend him check his books out. But along that note, what two books would you recommend right now?
Oh, because I knew you might ask about my favorite book. So I brought my favorite book right here.
Okay.
I've got that right here.
The Compound Effect, Darren Hardy. Yes. Love Darren Hardy.
I think it may have actually come from you because you talked about in your early podcasts, drive time, windshield time.
Yeah. Windshield University.
And, I'm a big musician and music fan. So I was like, first when I was driving around, I'm like, this is great. I get to listen to all my favorite bands. But after a while, I'm like,
You've heard every song, so many
you
times.
know, they're only so I got an Audible account, and
Yep.
I remembered I had liked some books I had read in the past, Rich Dad Poor Dad and Good and Great,
Kiyosaki.
other business books. I was like, well, what other business books? And so I stumped on this one. So this is my first audiobook, and I loved it so much I had to buy
Yeah,
it.
I've done that because there were like lines in that book that I wanted to be able to go back and highlight and stuff. I've done the same thing.
So to me, The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy, that's the book that really changed my life.
Awesome.
I do have a blog article, my top 11 favorite
Go ahead.
audiobooks. It's on my website. You Google I Am Home Inspections.
Give me five
Yep.
of them.
Okay, so Compound Effect is one. He's got a second book called The Entrepreneur Roller Coaster.
Yep. Sounds good too. Yep.
I should probably love that book more, but The Compound Effect is my main one.
Right.
Gary Keller, The One Thing.
Yeah. Yep.
If for nothing else, get in the mind of where Keller Williams agents are coming from, but it's actually a really good book.
No, it is.
Jen Sincero has a book called You're a Badass at Making Money.
Ooh, I need to write that one down. I haven't.
It's funny because most books are written by men.
Right.
This one's actually written by a woman, and she swears like a sailor, and it's like your drunk old aunt giving you advice on business.
Right.
It's just, she makes it funny.
Good stuff, man.
So, and that's a good change. God, there's so many. Where do you even choose next?
Well, you can add a couple more if you want.
A book I only recently read within the last year that I love, and I reread it like 3-4 times. It's called The Psychology of Money. That's a really fascinating book about not just about how you think about money and how different people think about money, and that really, money is really just a state in your head.
Who wrote that? Do you know the title of it?
I don't have that off the top of my head.
Psychology of Money. I'll look that up.
And then and then at the end he gets in this whole like U.S. historical data about perceptions of money, which really resonated with me because he talks about what happened in the 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s and how that affected the 70s, which is when I was born.
Right.
And then just sort of going like, oh, that's why my grandfather had these opinions and my mom had these opinions. And then I ended up with my reality.
Right.
Of, go to college and everything will be great. And then you go to college and find out, no, it's not great because everyone went to college and nobody cares anymore.
And it costs a lot more now than it did back then. And there's no jobs. It's kind of that was headed for a crash.
And just like, and people wax poetically about the 50s and early 60s. And like, well, the only reason they were great was because the 30s and 40s sucked so bad.
Especially the 30s.
You had the Depression in the 30s and then the war in the 40s. And then, so by the time we got to the 50s and everything was great, and everybody thinks, well, that's how, life should be. And like, but that was sort of a false reality built up on 20 years of bad stuff happening.
Right. No, I like that. I'll look that up.
And by the time I came around in the 70s, the rest of the world had sort of caught up. And so what made America special was no longer, and, I know it's getting a little esoteric and out there, but like that, like deeply affected like how I was raised and how my generation was raised and how everyone who's my age now tends to think about stuff. But also, he gets into like, money is like the one thing that you don't need a degree in, or you can get a degree in and still fail and not have any education and still succeed.
Right.
It's about a janitor who, died a millionaire, and someone who went to Harvard who made millions and then lost millions.
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting book.
Well, if you think about money, not trying to put words in this guy's mouth, but like I'm going to check that book out, but I'm a big fan of like Dan Kennedy and Gary Vaynerchuk and all that too. And, if you think about money, it's just stored value, right? I mean, the whole idea is you create value and you pay for value. So, in the old days, it'd be like, hey man, I'll inspect I mean, it didn't really inspect, but I'll do this for you. If we were put, you grew tomatoes, I grew potatoes, you give me some tomatoes, I'll give you some potatoes. Well, the reality is the potato, they sell that for money, and then the money is used to give somebody a potato. It's a stored form. So it's kind of like electricity in a way. And you think about, what is electricity attracted to? And, it's value. It's value. I mean, in money. So, it's all about creating value. And it wouldn't matter if it was money or bear skins or beaver skins or gold or whatever the storage of value is. So if you can create value, it's just a storage of value. So, I mean, the attraction of money is creating value, and if you can create value, the money or the bear skins or the gold will find its way to you.
And probably the other big one, it's actually not an audio, it's not a book, it's an audio book collection. The Day That Turned Your Life Around by Jim Rohn.
Okay.
So it's essentially they took all these. Jim Rohn has tons of audiobooks he recorded over years. So it's basically a best of his bits put together in a big package. That's a great one. That really got me thinking, because I'm like thinking, well, he was doing his thing in the 70s and the 80s, the 90s. How come nobody ever told me about him? Because he's got so many great lessons that so many of these other books have, are based on, of just, you got to improve yourself. You can't go around blaming the president and blaming the government and blaming the weather, which, is what I used to do in my 20s. All my problems were not my problems.
I still blame the weather, but
they're all everybody else's fault.
Yeah.
And realizing like, no, you got to figure this stuff out and make the best of your situation. And to me, that was, and it still boggles my mind that like schools don't teach this.
No, they don't.
Like Dale Carnegie's How to Make Friends and Influence People.
Yep.
I just think that was a joke. People would just say. I didn't realize until I was in my 30s that that's a real book. And it's actually a really, really good book. And I'm like, why did nobody give me this book when I was like a teenager? My entire life could have been very different if someone had given me that book at 15 or 16 instead of reading Dostoevsky and Romeo and Juliet and
Tolstoy and all that stuff. All those Jim Rohn, Dale Carnegie, Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar, even though that stuff's older and it's dated, it's still mindset wise, classic, man. Classic.
That still applies to today.
Yeah,
it really does. It drives me crazy that they don't teach that in schools.
Absolutely. Well, I'll give you two guys. Like I said, MJ DeMarco, Fast Lane Millionaire, and he's got 3 books out now, Unscripted and something else. I just like him, man. He's just cool. You'll like him too. I think you will. I mean, you just have to listen to his story. And Patrick Bet David is Your Next 5 Moves. He came over here from Iran, moved to California, and had nothing, immigrant family, and just he's good, man. He's good. I follow his valuetainment and stuff. Good stuff. All right. Well, last question for the lightning round, and you've probably heard this on the other podcast. If you woke up in a brand new city tomorrow, same size as LA, which I don't think there's any cities that big, but and you had all of your equipment, all your knowledge, food, but you didn't know anybody or have any business, and you had $5,000. How are you using that $5,000 to get the phone to ring or the computer to ding?
Oh man, I was hoping you wouldn't ask me this one. I mean, I love being a self-employed and I would not want to go back. I don't know if I'd want to start over though, because it's so much work to get it off the ground.
Yeah, it is.
But assuming I was not going to just go get a home inspector job for someone else, assuming I was really going to start it again, I would definitely, get a professional website built. get some business cards. I'd set up my Instagram and Facebook, and then, well, hopefully COVID would be gone by then and you could go out networking again. And just start figuring out where the realtors hang out.
Yeah.
Because anyone can go into an office and go, hey, I'm a home inspector. And, they're going to go, yeah. And so they've got 10 people doing that. Realtors get home inspectors, title companies, escrow companies, mortgage lenders.
Oh,
yeah. They're bombarded by people all day long. So just dropping by and dropping off some cards or candy or whatever, like that doesn't impress them at all. They don't care because they get 10 of those a day. But if you could go to where they hang out, where they have breakfast, where they have lunch, where they have their cocktails at night, if you can figure any of that out, then you can show up and get to know them as people. And if they get to know you as people, then they'll start hiring you.
Yeah.
And it takes time. Like that breakfast I told you about, I went there for 6 months every Friday before I got one deal. And then it was like another 3 months until I got the second one. And then it just like gold mine opened.
Yeah. Well, and I think if you can get somebody to start using you and like you, and then they're sort of a maven, or that people trust them. Probably what's happening on the back end of that is people are asking them, who do you use? And they recommend, you know what I mean? That's probably how that's happening, I bet.
One of the greatest things that ever happened to me was I was picking my kid up from school. And I used to wear my home inspector uniform everywhere. And my first shirts had my logo on the back in really big letters.
Mm-hmm.
I'd wear that everywhere. I don't care if you're going to the grocery store just to buy some milk. I'd put on my full uniform and I was going for it.
Never know where you might run into something. Yeah.
And I was at school picking up my youngest from pre-K. And actually a friend of mine was there. I was like, oh, you working today? I'm like, no, I didn't have any jobs today. I'm like, why are you dressed up? I'm like, because I am. My son, and this guy comes up to me and says, oh, you're a home inspector? I'm a real estate agent.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, okay. So we met, we exchanged cards, and I didn't realize that he was still a new agent at the time. But because I got to know him, I got to know a big agent in his office who started using me. He was like 50% of my second year of business.
Oh, wow.
And that original guy, his business started taking off, and now he's one of my top agents and one of my great friends.
That's awesome.
So people always say, what was the big thing that turned your business around? For me, it was like, I picked my kid up from school. But I was wearing my uniform at the time. And, I got in getting to know people. So the biggest advice I would say is, get a home inspector uniform with your logo that matches your website, that matches your business card, and just wear it everywhere.
I'll add one more to that. Get your logo put on the back of your computer laptop. So because I've gotten business same way, like being I used to go to Starbucks and always write my reports or whatever, because I'm at home, I'm too distracted. And I would get business because it was on the back of my laptop, the thing there. People would come up, so I think you can order them skins or whatever, but just like you said, same concept. Put your
you put your logo everywhere. And I've had people come up to me like, oh, did you buy a franchise? I'm like, no, but your logo is just, it's on everything. It looks so professional. I'm like, well, to me, that just came from bands, because that's what bands do. Bands get the logo and they put their logo on everything.
Yeah. Well, and you've got it. Every call that I've been on with you, you've got it in the background. I always thought, like, Ian and me, maybe one other. I mean, there'd be like 50 people out here. Nobody else does that. And I don't know if it's just because it's that coaching call or whatever, you wouldn't really need it. But, I'm like,
the background is because this is an actual banner from, doing trade shows.
Right.
Real estate expos. So I had the banner made years ago. And then when it became very obvious that we're not going to do any in-person networking and in-person events and everything was going to be online due to COVID, I was like, well, where do I sit? I sit on the couch and it's bad lighting, go outside, it's hot, over here, the dogs are barking or the kids. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to create a little Zoom corner. And like, what should my background be? I'm like, well, I've got this giant banner that I can't use anymore because we can't do any real live events. So I hung my banner up and put some lights up, and I just created like, this is my Zoom. So now anytime I'm on any meeting or call or training, whatever, like I don't think about where am I going to sit, where's my lighting. I just know, no, I'm going to go sit over here. My banner's in the
That's
back.
good. It's you're marketing it all the time, and that's brilliant. And it's not backwards either. I know sometimes when you film yourself, like the wording is backwards. I don't know if that's true with Zoom or not, but it's not backwards. It's fine. That's
So
good stuff.
always be marketing.
Absolutely. All right, and well, I've held you up a long time, and I know you got a lot of stuff to do today. So let's go to the marketing round. Ginger or Marianne?
Are we talking about Gilligan's Island?
Yep.
Oh, I don't know. Marianne's probably more my style.
Yeah, that's everybody said. One person said Ginger.
I love the band Ginger, but that's a different subject.
All right, see if you can finish the lyrics on this song, or at least know what the song is. All right, you ready? Let me see if I can get it.
I know what song it is. Tom Sawyer by Rush.
There you go. There you go.
I
You got it.
finished the Tom part more than I can finish the lyrics, but
5 points. I picked that because I knew you were a drum guy, and the Neil, what isn't he supposed to be like one of the top drummers?
Rush has been one of my favorite bands since I was 12.
Yeah. Well, I looked it up and we talked before, and I was like, he's a drum guy. So I was like, I got to pick somebody who's like, I'm like, that was the first thing that came to mind. I was like, all right, what band has a really good drum or well-known drummer? I was like, oh, Rush.
Well, Rush is what got me interested in maybe I'd want to be a drummer.
Really? Oh, well, that was awesome. That was awesome. Good song.
The Who is what got me into really wanting to dedicate my life to being a drummer.
Cool. Well, you're going to have to incorporate that at some point. You're going to have to put that into something. All right. Christmas Vacation or Elf? Oh, this is this or that. You pick one or the other. Christmas Vacation or Elf?
I don't even know.
The movie.
I've never seen either.
You haven't seen any one of those? All right. Animal House.
I used to work for a movie company,
Mm-hmm.
and it was such a miserable experience. And I know everybody wants to come to LA and work in the movies. I got a job working for a movie company, and it was such a miserable experience that it made me not want to watch movies anymore.
Oh no! Well, then my next question's a movie one, but maybe you've watched these two: Animal House or Caddyshack.
Those two I had to watch because those came out, when I was a little kid. So have seen both of them. I don't really remember, and I know I've seen Animal House. I don't remember much about it. I remember Caddyshack, how it ends. That's about all I remember about it. So I guess Caddyshack. I don't know.
Caddyshack. Yeah. Well, you can't go wrong with either one of those. All right. Continuing with this or that. Dog or cat?
Dog. I have 3 dogs.
Would you rather have a phone call or text?
Depends who it's from. I guess phone call. I do kind of like that personal touch, but I don't like calling people.
Right. iOS or Apple or Android?
You know what? I own all of each.
You have a preference?
I'm on a Windows laptop with you right now, right over there. I've got a Mac computer. My phone's Android. My wife's phone's iPhone. I've had everything. I bounce back and forth.
Yeah. I'm Android and PC, but the rest of my family, my wife, my daughters, they're all Apple and MacBook and all that. I don't know. I used to have an iPhone, but to me, the only bad thing with them, they don't play well with non-Apple stuff. That's the only thing I don't like about it. I like the way their stuff, smooths together. Would you rather go to the beach or the mountains?
Ooh, I love both, but beach, I have to say, because that's why I stay in California, because my proximity to the beach.
Yeah, your weather there is fantastic. I've been to Southern California a couple of times. I definitely.
We're 20 minutes from Malibu over the hill, so. And that's people always say, "Why do you stay in California? It's expensive. Your taxes are high." And I'm like, yeah, but I can be in Malibu in 20 minutes, and that's
and what's your median temperature in January?
In January. I mean, during the day, it's still probably 60s, 70s. It might get down to the 40s at night.
Yeah.
Occasionally we get frost.
See, I'm in the middle of Carolina. It's definitely not as bad as like the Northeast or middle North, but still, January and December, January, and February, it's like 40s, 50s during the day. And it's, sometimes you get like multiple days where it's just gray and cold and rainy. And man, that Southern California thing, they don't get too many days like that, I don't think, do you?
I grew up in San Francisco, and Mark Twain always said the coldest winter he ever spent was the summer in San Francisco.
The summer in San Francisco. Nice.
So, and that is so true. San Francisco is like, it's 50 degrees year round. It never gets warm. It always just seems cold and miserable. So I grew up in that. So I'm like, I want my sun. I want to have my sunshine. I've got a pool. No one had pools in San Francisco. So it was always a dream of mine one day to have a house with pools. So now I have a house with a pool. And here we don't winterize them. I think in the 14 years I've been here, only once we ever wake up and find ice in the pool.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you something else too. We went to San Francisco a couple of years ago. We did the whole California thing. And I think we spent a weekend in San Francisco and we liked it. We did all the touristy stuff, the twisty road and the Golden Gate Bridge. But I wanted, we went across the Golden Gate Bridge to the other side to like where that forest is and stuff. Mm-hmm. And we went up that little drive to try to get a picture. And half of it's covered in fog because, the temperature, obviously the air is colder than the water, it creates fog or whatever. And somebody told me it's like that all year long, except like 1 month.
It is. I remember when my mom was still alive, it was July and I went to the beach and I'm sitting there enjoying, single at the time. So I'm looking at girls in bikinis and and then next morning, got in the car, drove up to see my mom. And I'm sitting there in the living room that I grew up in, and it is so foggy, you can't see 20 feet.
Wow.
And I'm like, why am I here? Yesterday, I was in the sun looking at girls in bikinis, and now I'm sitting here in this fog. And they're like, that's how I grew. So I'm all about sticking to the beach.
Cool. But we did enjoy San Francisco, the sourdough bread and the pier with all the seals. That was fun. All right. Would you rather wear tennis shoes or flip-flops?
I can't wear flip-flops.
So tennis shoes. Rather have hamburgers or tacos?
Tacos. I'm a big Mexican food fan.
Most important in a partner, intelligent or funny?
Oh.
I know these questions are a little weird. I tried to switch it up a little bit.
You gotta have some of each.
Yeah.
My wife is definitely funny, but she's also smart in a lot of ways, especially the ways that I'm not.
Would you rather have a day at a theme park like Disney or a day at the beach?
Beach. Theme parks are expensive.
Gotcha. Coffee. Would you rather have iced coffee or hot coffee?
Oh, I suppose hot.
All right.
I like iced coffee. It also depends the time of the day.
And the most important question of all, toilet paper, over or under? Do you the beard or is it the beard or the mullet?
Well, it's got to be over.
Yeah. I've had one person who said under. And I don't know if do you know Roy Weir? He's an inspector.
Yes.
He'll go in and switch them. He'll take a picture. I think it bothers him so much. Like he's like, all right, it's fixed now. Your toilet paper was broken, but I fixed it.
Oh, yeah, we've had some discussions in this house about that.
I got you. I'm just happy when, and my wife's happy when people replace the toilet paper when it's out. Over or under?
Discussing this yesterday, because I'm sure you've heard about some of these bath fans. They're so quiet. The only way to test them is put a piece of toilet paper on there and see if it sucks.
Oh, yeah.
But what do you do if the house has no toilet paper in it? You can't really test it. And usually you just go by the sound, but some of these modern ones are so quiet, it doesn't make a sound. So you have to do toilet paper. But if there's no toilet paper, you can't test it.
Only thing I can think
carry it around with you because you try and carry it around in your pocket, though, it just gets wadded up and then it's no good. So,
yeah, I guess just if you put your hand up there and feel it or something. I don't know. I know a long time ago, somebody trained me and they were like, you can tell if a flue's drawing with a match, or a door, and I'm like, I'm not sure I want to check a flue to see if it's drawing though. What if there's a gas leak and I'm lighting a match? That doesn't sound like a good idea, to be lighting a match
If
around
you put a
gas.
match and the house starts burning down, do you think your insurance companies can cover that?
Probably not. They're going to look for any way to get out of it that they can. Well, awesome. Well, and it's been great. You dropped lots of gold nuggets. Is there anything you mentioned once before that I didn't ask? And I changed the format up a little bit. Probably a lot of the ones you heard, just to try to freshen it up. But is there anything that I didn't ask you that I should have asked you?
Oh, I'm sure there was, because I used to listen to your old podcast and I would script out all my answers.
And then I changed the
I didn't do
format.
that this time. No, I think we covered a lot. I mean, we covered how I got in the business. We covered, I suppose the one thing, I mean, we talked a lot about books. I suppose the importance of books is, how you get over those mental hurdles of going from, not making any money or thinking you're a one-man shop and maybe you're not doing as well as you'd like, and how you get to that bigger company. And that really comes down to mindset. And a lot of the mindset comes from reading the books and doing the exercises and realizing where in your life you've maybe gone wrong and what you can do to fix it. So I'm real big on mindset. And if you want to talk about mindset for an hour or marketing for an hour, I'm going to choose mindset every time, because the marketing will follow.
You'll figure it out. Yeah.
And that's something I wish somebody had explained to me when I was a lot younger. It took me until I was in my 40s to start even figuring it out. And now it's taking me into my early 50s here to really understand, that's where the gold is.
Right. Well, and it's the same thing. And every time I've grown in my business, it was, I think early on, like maybe not asking for help or just thinking I could figure it all out on myself. But it is like some of these things, you reach out to other people in other markets. A lot of times people are willing to help, and mindset, and meeting, like I had people that I kind of like really looked up to, and I still look up to them. And then when I met them, they always say, don't meet your heroes, because sometimes it's like they're a jerk in real life. For the most part, in home inspection, most of them aren't. I mean, there may be a few. I mean, most of the people that I like turned out to be pretty cool people. And then I got to meet them and talk to them, and, and I interview a lot of them. And, the reality is too, I hope I don't say this the wrong way, but I hope this isn't like insulting, but I realized through talking to them, hey, you know what? They're cool and I like them, but they're, it's not like their IQ is like 30 points higher than me. I mean, if they can do it, I can do it. And I don't mean that as an insult to them. I just got to figure out what they know or their mindset that I don't have. But it's not like, I really don't think if we both, took the SAT that they're going to score 400 points higher than me. It's not it's not me being stupid, does that make sense? I hope I didn't butcher that.
Well, I'm going to go back, because I'm going to apologize to insulting you that you never knew I did. But, I listened to your podcast, way back 2014, 2015, 2016. And like, why is Preston always going on about multi-inspector firms? Like, it used to kind of bug me. Like, why is he always asking people about their first hire and going that route? Like, isn't this a career for one-man shops? Isn't that what the value is in home inspecting? And then, of course, now here I am with assistant inspectors under me. And I'm realizing, like, no, Preston was right the entire time. I was the one whose mindset was in, because my mindset was just, I need to pay the mortgage, put some food on the table.
Right. Well, and I was a one-man shop.
On that mindset.
I was a one-man shop for probably 7 or 8 years. So I didn't always have that mindset. I met somebody else that, I'm not going to say they gave me the blueprint, but I looked at it and I was like, and they had like 6 inspectors at the time. And I thought, nothing against that person, but I'm like, it's not like that person's that much smarter than me. They just have a different mindset, and I've got to adopt that mindset or something similar. You know what I mean?
No, that's what it came down to, when I started getting around people who did have bigger companies, and, it was put like, oh, they're not really doing anything different. They just have a different mindset. And I'm like, fine, I'm going to change my mindset. I don't know how I'm going to change it, but that's going to be my goal.
Right.
And that's how it works. So you can change your mindset, then everything else just sort of falls into place.
Yeah. Well, I think, we grow up and go to school, and you mentioned this earlier, and I'm not trying to hold you up, but the blueprint of us growing up was, you go to school, you make good grades, you get a good degree, and you make good money. So in my early mindset, the two ways you made money was you had to be really smart or good at athletics. Those were the only two routes. And those people who were really good at athletics, that was like 1 out of 10,000. So you had to be really smart. And then when I started getting into business, I met some people, and it was like, well, it's not that they're dumb, but they don't. I don't think they scored a 1600 on the SAT. It was a lot more like, yeah, they're probably smarter than average, but it's not like they're Einstein. I think it's mindset, being ability to take risk, communication. So there's a lot of stuff I feel like they don't teach you in school that you have to learn on your own. Does that make sense?
They don't teach you anything in school. I mean, I remember, like I said, my grandfather was barely graduated high school and was self-employed and was fairly successful until the end, because he didn't know when to stop. And but in high school, it was just about, well, you got to work hard so you can get into a good college, and in college,
exactly.
you got to work hard so you can get a good job. And I remember we were assigned a paper in one of my business classes, write a letter to your future boss. And I said, well, I want to be self-employed someday. And he
I letter to myself.
She just looked at me like I was an alien from outer space. Not one of my college professors had any concept of working for yourself.
Yeah.
Their only objective in any of those classes I took was to get you a job somewhere.
Right.
And, my mom and my grandfather and relatives and teachers, like, their whole mindset was, no, you got to go to school so you can get a job, and then you'll be taken care of.
Not true. That last part, it maybe have been true in the 1950s.
Well, that's the other thing, and that's the other thing that Psychology of Money goes into is how that whole story that everybody has, that you get a good job and you work there until your pension, is actually a fake story. It was only a small smidgen of time that was even a reality.
Right.
And which was, essentially the 50s and early 60s. But, the reality is now you get laid off, your company gets bought out, your company gets merged, your company relocates without you, your
and
company
you get laid off.
This. And, this whole idea of you're going to work somewhere forever and then get a pension. I mean, pensions didn't even exist until after World War II.
Right.
So it's even mind-boggling that that's where people's mind is. But of course, that's what you're taught in school. So,
yeah.
I was reading a book, Tim Ferriss, and he has a book where he just is excerpts of like 100 interviews. And I don't even remember who said this, but he says, I don't ever ask my kids what they want to be when they grow up, because that job probably hasn't been invented yet. And then I thought about it, like, how many of my friends are in IT and tech and video game design and web design? We didn't have any of that when I was a kid.
Yeah. I didn't know what a home inspector was when I was a kid. I'd never heard of
if
that.
you think about it, actually formed in 1976, because they will never let you forget that. So that means when I was born, no, there were no home inspectors.
Right. Same. Yeah, it came about in the well, I guess early 80s. There's late.
Well, it was late 70s is when it started becoming a real thing, and even in the 80s, it's still. I don't ever remember my mom by having a home inspector when we bought the house that we moved into. So like we were talking here, having this whole career or whole discussion about a career that didn't even exist when we were born.
Right.
And so to me, it's like really silly that we're going to sit around in school and talk about careers that don't exist yet.
I hear
because
you.
The proof is in the pudding that most of my friends who have jobs work at careers that did not exist when we were kids.
Awesome. But some of them can be fired and you can't. So that was your point. You'll never be fired again or laid off.
I'll never be laid off. I might try to lay myself off, but I can't. But I will.
Awesome. Well, Ann, thank you so much for your time. You've lots of gold nuggets. So all the listeners out there, if you got some value, and come on, you did, Ann dropped some gold nuggets here. how can they go like your Facebook? Because I think that'll help you a little bit. Check out your website. I think if a whole bunch of people go to that, it might help your algorithm and stuff. How can they find you? And is there, if they wanted to know more about you or something you said, can they email you, or how can they do that?
Yeah, I am homeinspections.com.
Okay.
The letter I, the letter M, because I thought it was a very funny play on words. It was not my first choice in name, but I couldn't find anything else. And I thought, oh, no one ever took that name before. So it happens to be my initials, but really came from I am the home inspector.
Right. No, I like it.
Shortened, it's just I am, because I thought it was a very funny play on words. So I am homeinspections.com. I am at IamHomeInspections.com as your email box. I know we're at Facebook.com/I am home inspections. I think Instagram is IM_home_inspections.
And follow this guy. Follow this guy on Instagram. He's killing it on there. So follow him, like his stuff. That'll help him out a little bit, but you probably get some tips, and this is a little rule I want to put out there. A lot of home inspectors put stuff out. I always ask them, hey, can I use this, in my market? Just use a little etiquette. I've only ever had one inspector say no, which I'm still kind of shocked about. I'll tell you about that privately.
All right, all right, we're gonna go back to home tips. Watermark your photos.
Yeah.
Because so many times you see a photo gets passed around and passed around and passed around and passed around, and then 4 years later get passed around again.
Yeah.
And you're like, who took that photo originally?
Yeah.
Watermark your photos with your logo. So if someone passes around, at least your logo gets passed around.
Yeah.
I
don't care when people do it, but I do like when they ask me, like, hey, can I steal this? Because the reality is, a home inspector in Iowa, they're the people on their Facebook group, other than us. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Now if they were in my market, I'd be like, come on, man.
Well, that's the other thing that kind of goes down to blogging and making your stuff localized. Like I do a lot of blogs about store and pools and stuff. Like nobody in Iowa is going to steal that.
Yeah. Well, and what I meant, like steal something, I usually like a funny meme or something, like somebody will put something out there like, oh, that's good. As long as it's not controversial.
I don't ever post memes. So
awesome. Well, I'll follow you.
Only post original content.
There you go. All right, Ian. Well, thank you so much for your time. And I'll get this up by Friday or Saturday, and I'll send you a link.
I'm looking forward to it. It's been an honor to be here.
Thanks. Let me hit the